The dispossession of Aboriginal people in Australia has had an important and ongoing impact on their spiritualities, deeply rooted in their interconnectedness to the land, way of kinship, and cultural practices. The spiritual consequences of this dispossession have ruined century old traditions, severed ties to ancestral lands, and separated kinship networks, resulting in intergenerational trauma. The stolen generations further exacerbated this impact by deliberately separating Aboriginal children from their families, culture, and language, resulting in widespread spiritual dislocation. The history of Aboriginal dispossession is central to understanding contemporary Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal relations. Aboriginal spiritualities are tied to the land, which is not treated as a physical environment but a living entity with a deep sacred meaning. The land is central to the dreaming, the spiritual framework that defines Aboriginal culture and identity. The dreaming provides moral guidance and connects individuals to their ancestors, kin, and totems. Dispossession of land, particularly through colonization, mining, and urban development, disrupts this connection, leaving Aboriginal people alienated from their spiritual anchors. Without access to sacred sites and the ability to perform traditional rituals, many communities have struggled to maintain their spiritual practices. Kinship systems are another cornerstone of Aboriginal spirituality, serving as a foundation for social structure, moral obligations, and spiritual guidance. Kinship ties determine roles, responsibilities, and connections to the dreaming, reinforcing a sense of belonging and cultural identity. However, the process of dispossession disrupted these complex networks. Forced relocations, government-imposed missions, and assimilation policies fractured kinship groups, dispersing families across distant regions and ruining traditional social structures. The loss of these bonds weakens the transmission of spiritual knowledge, leaving younger generations stripped of access to the cultural teachings that they would otherwise have access to. This separation has contributed to a loss of cultural knowledge, enhancing feelings of alienation and disconnection within Aboriginal communities. The stolen generations is one of the most devastating products of dispossession, with spiritual, cultural, and mentally tolling consequences. Between the 1910s and 1970s, many Aboriginal children were removed from their families because of government policies aimed at assimilation. This forced Aboriginal children to adopt an Australian lifestyle and live as members of a single Australian community. These children were often placed in institutions or foster homes where they were prohibited from speaking their languages or practicing their spiritual traditions. Cultural dislocation removed the passing on of knowledge between various generations, creating a gap in spiritual and cultural identity. The intergenerational effects of the stolen generations are evident today, as many Aboriginal families continue to endure the burden of cultural dislocation. The lack of language skills, traditional practices, and cultural knowledge has made it challenging for descendants to reconnect with their ancestors and cultural background. Indigenous people in society today make efforts to try and reconnect with their heritage, but face significant challenges due to the severity of cultural dislocation caused by dispossession. Despite these challenges, Aboriginal communities have demonstrated strong resilience in preserving and reviving their spiritualities. The recognition of their native title, First Nations people, the establishment of cultural heritage protection laws, and the growing acknowledgement of Aboriginal history and culture in mainstream Australian society have provided pathways for reconnection with the land and cultural practices. This has been further enhanced by movements such as the Bringing Them Home report in 1997, which raised awareness of the cultural dislocation endured by those of Aboriginal descent who lived through the time of dispossession. In conclusion, the ongoing impact of dispossession on Aboriginal people is huge and encompasses the loss of connection to the land, the separation of kinship systems, and the trauma endured by the children of the stolen generations. These hardships have challenged the preservation and transmission of their spiritual traditions, leading to widespread cultural dislocation and intergenerational trauma. However, the resilience and determination of Aboriginal communities to revive their spiritual heritage bring to light the enduring strength of their cultural identity. Addressing these consequences of dispossession requires strong will and support for initiatives that empower Aboriginal people to reconnect with their spiritual and cultural roots, such as the aforementioned Bringing Them Home report. Although this is just a little step in recognition, it ultimately ends in a giant leap for Aboriginals reconstructing their connection to their ancestors.